So in the previous video, we talked about Newton's laws of motion. And we said in this video, we're going to expand a bit on Newton's first law of motion, which talks about staying at rest or uniform motion, or maintaining your uniform motion, unless there is a force that acts on you or acts on that object for it to change its state of motion or its state of rest or uniform motion, right? There is something called inertia. It is a very important concept, inertia. So the first law of motion actually expresses the idea of inertia. Inertia is defined as, so we can write, it is the reluctance of a body to start moving and reluctance of body to stop moving once it has begun moving. Once it has begun moving, right? So this basically means an object at rest would want to stay at rest, and it will only start to move if enough force acts on it. Just like an object that is moving, it will want to stop. It will want to continue moving, but it will only stop if enough force is applied on it. That's just what it is. So an object probably not like stop moving or change direction. An object will want to remain in that straight line, in that state of motion, like Newton's first law says, state of motion. It will want to remain in that uniform state of motion unless a force acts on it, maybe to change direction, to stop, to do whatever it is doing, right? So the reluctance of it changing its motion is inertia, right? So let's imagine this situation. Let's imagine we are on a bus. Okay, I told you my drawings are not the best in the world, but hopefully they will just emphasize the concept. So imagine we are on a school bus, right? We are on a school bus. So I'm going to just cut the school bus so that you see inside. Imagine inside we have people that are standing. I think you have stood in a bus before. So this was very common in Zimbabwe in the 90s. Okay, yeah, I'm Zimbabwean, so yeah. In the 90s, it was very common in our buses called Zupco, that way from the government. They used to be so full, so people would stand. So like this, imagine you're standing. Imagine you're standing like that, right? Before the driver comes, you're standing nicely. You're standing up straight before the driver comes. And then he comes, switches on the bus. When he presses the accelerator to just start moving, I think you've noticed that when he starts moving, you are pulled back like that. The bus pulls you back like that. But when it starts moving, you go back a bit. Even in a car, when you're sitting in a car, you go back a bit. It's because your body wants to stay at rest. It has a reluctance to start moving. It's like, no, I don't want to move. But because enough force is acted on the body, like the pulling of the bus is pulling you along with it, right? You then start moving with the bus because you go back a bit and then you come to be straight. You are now moving with the bus easy. You don't stay slanted like this for a long time. You then go back upright when the bus is now just cruising, because now you're moving with the bus. So it's just the initial reluctance for it to start moving, for the body to start moving. It's like, I don't want to move right now unless you give me enough force for me to move. And when you're given that enough force to move, you then move. Or an object on a table, like your cell phone. Just try push your cell phone with your pinky finger. It might not move. It's because you haven't applied enough force for it to overcome friction. When you're putting your pinky finger like that, when you're pushing it with your pinky finger, it might not want. How many fingers are those, man, Houston? What kind of art is that? When you're pushing it with your pinky finger or your index, this looks more like an index finger. So, okay, let's just call it an index finger. When you're pushing with your index finger, this phone would not want to move until you increase your force, and then it starts sliding on the table. So right now, it doesn't want to move because there is friction that is keeping it, that is in contact with the table. It doesn't want to move until you overcome that friction. Let's say the friction is 10 newtons. Until you apply a force that is more than 10 newtons, you're not going to move the phone. But when you apply 11 newtons, then it will start moving, right? Because it has a reluctance to start moving because of its inertia. We're going to describe where this inertia comes from, right? Now, imagine in a bus, we are cruising, and then there's an emergency brake, right? Imagine this guy wanted to skip the robot. Then he puts on the emergency brakes because he sees metro cops, but the robot was orange, so he screeches to stop the bus before he gets to the robot, right? What will happen is you will slant forward. You will slant forward as if you want to fall forwards. You slant forward. Why? The reason that happens is because your body was moving. And once it has started moving, it now develops a reluctance to stop moving. It's now saying, no, I'm moving. I want to keep moving, right? I want to keep moving. So when the bus stops immediately, your body continues moving forward because it wants to keep moving. I've already started moving, so it wants to keep moving, right? It is that reluctance to stop moving. But as you hold on to the bus, because the bus has stopped and stuff, and you are now pulled back by the bus, you then move because you have been, and enough force has been applied on you, right? This thing is exactly what happened in the movie Gravity. Spoilers. The spoiler of the end of the spoiler tag will be there. So I'm starting spoilers again. When George Clooney pushed Sandra Bullock, he could not stop because there was no force to bring him back. So he had inertia, he now had high reluctance to stop moving. And in space, there is nothing to get rid of that reluctance. So he kept going and going and going and going just because of that. So he had no force to get rid of that reluctance for him to stop moving, right? So that is the concept of inertia. Let me call back our friends who need to go watch Gravity. Please go watch Gravity, please. One classic movie, and the way it was so accurate, like physics-wise, you can even YouTube it, because that's what I did. I went on YouTube to try to understand how accurate is it physics-wise. And some physicists came up, their professors, describing the physics behind gravity. Like, yeah, they were accurate here and there, and stuff like that, which is quite fascinating, I think. So, this is inertia. But where does inertia come from? You might be wondering, why? Why does it happen? One thing I'm going to tell you is this. So, inertia comes from the mass of an object. Mass, let me just say, mass brings about inertia. Right? Imagine you have a small stone on a table, and imagine you have a big rock on the same table surface. You have a big rock on the same table surface. Put your index finger, right? Put your index finger and try to move the stone. It doesn't take much to move the stone. It doesn't take much to get rid of its reluctance, right? To start moving. Reluctance to start moving, it doesn't take much force. You might use maybe 10 newtons, let me just guess 10 newtons. But now here, try push this stone. This rock, try push that rock. You need a greater force. You might not even be able to use your index finger. You might probably have to wrap your whole hand around this whole thing and push it hard. You might use a force of maybe 150 newtons, right? Why? Because this stone is not heavy. This small stone is not heavy. Maybe even maybe 100 grams, I don't know, 100 grams. But this rock here might be 5 kgs. When you talk about mass, it might be 5 kgs. Because this thing is heavy, it has more mass, it has more inertia. Its reluctance to start moving is higher than the reluctance of this thing that is of this small stone that has a low mass. So this one has a lower reluctance, so a lower inertia because of the lower mass. That's the same thing. Have you seen a truck, a big, those haulage trucks that have trailers? Those trucks that have big trailers. Have you seen like maybe an accident for those trucks? The truck will try by all means to stop, but it will keep going and going and going. It's difficult to stop a very big truck than to stop like a small Picanto. Like a small Picanto, that car is much easier to stop because it's very small. It doesn't weigh that much. Let me just say it's 2 tons. I'm just guessing. I don't know what a Picanto is. 1 ton, 2 tons, I have no idea. But this big truck might be even 15 tons. I'm just guessing. 15 tons. Because this is massive. Because this is a higher mass. It has a higher reluctance to stop moving. It has a higher inertia. This has a lower mass, so it has a lower reluctance, so it has a lower inertia. It can stop much easier than this big truck. So inertia comes out of the mass of the object. Heavier objects have higher inertias. For them to start moving, they have a higher reluctance to start moving, right? And when they are moving, they have a higher reluctance to stop moving. They don't want to move. They don't want to do anything. You need to apply loads of force to change their state of rest or state of motion, which is what inertia is about. So that is a very, very important concept. In the next video, we are now going to get into some equations when we talk about forces. So stay tuned for that video. I hope you have understood inertia and then Newton. Let's develop this physics concept a bit better.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.